week's High Ground podcast. This one is going to be special. I actually had other plans for this week, but I saw a rant so good that I pushed back my previous plans so we can talk about these awesome characters. You'll be able to blame Stardust M for that, who will be on this episode. But yeah, we are going to be diving into the characters that may not get the same amount of grace and nuance afforded to them that others get. That was a fascinating topic and wanted to discuss it right here on the high ground. Hello and welcome everyone. Thank you for joining me on the High Ground podcast. I'm excited because I believe everyone here has not been on High Ground before. I did speak with M before on Dyad in the Forest a couple weeks ago, and it was a treat. So I'm excited. It's always fun to talk to new creators, especially ones that I've been following all of you for a very long time. But I want to start out by kind of going around and have y'all introduce, who you are, where we can find your awesome content. And I can't recall my icebreaker question. I'm trying to pull it up right now, and I clicked on the wrong links. All right. Who's the coolest underrated character? And try to be actually underrated, But yeah, character no one talks about or thinks about, and they're just special to you for one reason or another. I'm going to go to Nathan first.
Hey y'all, I'm Nathan. I'm at the Favoring Wind on TikTok, and I think my go-to underrated character is the Shadow, whose poster's behind me. I like pulp heroes a lot. I feel like in the renaissance of superhero media, pulp characters tend to fall by the wayside a lot. And I'm a big advocate of my pulp masked vigilantes, and the Shadow's at the top of the list.
Nice.
The Shadow, interesting choice.
Nice.
Him and Zorro had a baby, and it was Batman.
Exactly. Two proud fathers.
How about you, Em?
Hi, I'm Emily. You can find me on TikTok at StardustM or on Twitter at _StardustM. I think in Star Wars, at least, I'll say Bodhi Rook. I love that man so much, and he did kind of save everything. And I feel like nobody really gives him the appreciation that he deserves, and we're not giving nearly enough hype to Riz Ahmed's performance of him. Really amazing. He's my favorite.
All right. No, that's a good choice. I would like to find out more about him and like Imperial piloting skills and stuff like that, because there's got to be a backstory there.
Yeah.
Also, I think about Borg Gullet, and it just grosses me out. Sorry, what were we gonna say?
I was gonna say, I think it's implied kind of that he's not that good of a pilot, or like he's a good pilot, but like he wasn't good enough to be like a TIE fighter. He says that, so that's why part of the reason he's like a cargo pilot. My friend, I have a mutual on Twitter who is obsessed with Borg Gullet, and they recently sent me Borg Gullet will know the truth stickers.
That's deeply uncomfortable. How about you, Akula?
What's going on? I am Inquisitor Akula. You can find me on Inquisitor_Akula on TikTok. That is where I reside. I think I have two underrated characters. I would say underrated because everybody loves the Old Republic cinematic trailers, but like I don't think anybody does their homework on the lore. I love Arcade and Thaxton because a lot of people don't know that I'm a twin.
I did not know that.
And my relationship with my sister is very similar, as our dad really played us against each other a lot. It's kind of weird. We had that kind of triangle relationship, very similar to the brothers. So I think they're underrated, as their relationship is not really talked about a lot.
That's cool. Yeah, I don't have a twin. I can kind of relate to that with my sister, but it's cool to hear. And how about you, Natasha?
Yeah. Such a good question. I'm also going to go with two characters, kind of. I'm going to go with Rose and Paige Tico. I adore them so much, and I just feel like it's been such a disservice not to be able to like know more about the history of those two characters.
Agreed.
And I think for
Agreed.
me in particular, also having a sister, like I just really love stories about siblings, and it would be really nice to explore a sibling relationship outside of the Skywalkers at some point.
Yes.
So like, so yeah, that would be my pick for sure. Oh,
Awesome.
and you can find me on TikTok at NMNap, and then Twitter NNapper. So
Awesome. All right. Well, I am going to. Y'all know who I am if you're here. Probably. I hope. For my underrated character, out of Star Wars, I'm gonna say Sideways because there's a DC hero called Sideways. He teleports, goes through dimensions. Super cool. No one ever talks about.
Nobody ever talks
He just
about it.
just disappeared. Like that the hell. Sideways was cool. Like I think Sideways and Damage came out at the same time, and I don't care about Damage. Anyways, look up Sideways. And for Star Wars, I am gonna have to go with. I mean,
Can y'all hear that
Yeah.
craziness going on upstairs? Can y'all hear that in my house?
no, I can't.
Good.
The character is getting a lot of love now, and I didn't realize how cool they were. With Sabe, Sabe is a queen, and yeah, we stand Sabe here. But awesome. All right, let's kind of jump into it. So first thing I gotta ask is like, all of you guys have made content where you talk about like the subtleties behind characters, or just different things that people tend not to pick up on, and so that makes me curious on what types of stories like draw you guys are drawn to and why. I think that I don't know, it'd be interesting. Yeah, what do you think, Em?
I mean, I was a really big fan of dystopian fiction when I was a teenager, so I think in that case I'm usually drawn to, I mean, stories about like the underdog and fighting a government. So in that case, I really love stories that center the rebellion, especially stories that center in Star Wars the rebellion with non-force sensitive characters, and getting to see how they are just as important to the galaxy and how they contribute just as much to fighting the Empire as, say, someone like Luke or Kanan or Ezra. And I like also exploring like the darker side of that, like the more kind of realistic side of like the sacrifices made, the bad things that people have to do when you're kind of up against this horrible fascist government that doesn't really have any issues with killing people, slavery, stuff like that. So that's kind of what I'm drawn to in Star Wars.
Okay, and I like it, and it doesn't have to be just Star Wars, just in general. What type of stories like really draw you? But how about you, Akula?
I would have to agree. Like I wish I had like a more separate answer, but that she framed that perfectly, right? I like the political undertones, the heavy political undertones, even some of the dichotomies that we deal with good and evil. I love how Star Wars framed a lot of those, like kind of served a lot of those on a silver platter. The comparisons to a lot of our social climate today, like even being found in stories 30 years old in Star Wars. So I think I love the science fiction element. Like I love the futuristic space element, but as well as the fact that a lot of it kind of circulating in the storytelling of Star Wars. So yeah, I agree with Emma.
Yeah, especially like you can just sit with these stories and just kind of chew on them, and they mean so much more reading them at different times. I always talk about reading the book Leia Bloodlines for the second time in 2020, and it was too apt. Like it was scarily apt.
Yeah.
Real quick, I want to do some shout outs in the chat, and I'll bring the chat up, and it'll fill up. But I had for the underrated characters, Amy Medina also says the Ticos, Paige and Rose. We
Agreed.
got Fern in the chat, the mod guy with the long coat. Are we talking about our spinny boy, our twisty? Because we stand him as well. Bodhi, Amber also agrees with that. We got Escape Rally Films, moving away from my boy Zane, Aaron Leaner, and
Malgus.
Jahan Malgus made it out live. Oh, that's true. I totally forgot about. It's a throwback to the book Deceived. Been a minute since I read that one, but a good one. That's a question about other than twins and Clone Wars and Skywalkers. Yeah, it's a question about Tiplar and Tip Lee. I don't know about any other siblings though.
That's a good question. I don't
The
know.
Trek and what are their names?
In the High Republic?
Yeah,
Oh,
the two
yeah.
Jedi.
Yeah.
Creed.
Tarek and Sarat.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's true. That is true.
Yeah.
Our non-binary guys, people.
Yes.
I don't know why I said guy. I use guys gender neutrally. But I apologize. Awesome. Oh, okay. And I kind of shuffled my screen around, but Natasha?
Yeah, I think I agree a bit with what folks have already said, but one thing is I'm really interested in stories that are rooted in mutual aid, care, and people who are taking care of each other. To be honest, I kind of get a little exhausted with like anti-hero stories after a while. And I really enjoy seeing stories of people that just genuinely have just like empathy for the people around them and just like are centering kind of like building like found families, which is also like such the basis of Star Wars. Star Wars is such a like found family space, which is what draws me to this fandom and to this work. But yeah, I think when it's why a character like Rose Tico is so important to me, like a character that is rooted in there are ways to move together and fight that aren't always rooted in violence all of the time, and being able to find those ways and to just find peace inside of the chaos. I love stories that like also just center on like building connections with people in difficult times. So yeah, just the way that things don't always have to be war does not always have to mean loss. And it doesn't always have to be sacrifice all of the time. Sometimes people can just survive and be and find these like beautiful connections together. And yeah, I like finding those sort of nuggets in stories.
Ooh, I like that a lot.
Really good.
And as Fern says, yeah, stories of care and empathy are key. Edginess can get exhausting. And I find, for me, it's something like Daniel Jose Older said to us in our interview. It's like a good writer tells the truth. Like that's what you're writing. And for me, that appeals to me. So I love things that have those truths, but told in a unique fashion or a unique medium. One of my favorite films of all time, Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind, is it is a sci-fi-ish movie, but it's like, what are we without our memories, and are we doomed to repeat and it touches on so many different things, but just in such a unique way. That's also why I love The Last Jedi so much. Is, and I hear this take of, I wish I could have seen Luke Skywalker just crushing walkers, and like, that's so lame to me. I don't know how to say it.
I love that comparison because what Last Jedi and Eternal Sunshine have in common for these like very genre heavy concepts that they are and stories that they are, they're both very vulnerably human movies. And that's just I would have never thought to make that comparison. That's very apt.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I grew up in this. I've talked about it here before, but like the area I grew up actually had a lot of like white supremacists and stuff, and so I've always had to be physically strong enough that I could throw down if need be at any point in time. But like living life on edge sucks, and you end up, I prefer empathy and talking to people and understanding so much more, and I just lack that idealized version of violence. It's not, it happens, but it's not the point. And so that's why I'm drawn to like Star Wars and stuff as well. Luke in Return of the Jedi wins by stopping and throwing down his weapon, and that's just like magical to me,
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, how about you, Nathan?
I was actually thinking about this for writing reasons recently, that what attracts me in stories can mostly be brought down to does it sound like a character in Hey Arnold is telling it? Like a lot of my storytelling preferences come from like the grandfather and Gerald in Hey Arnold. But the other one being I moved around a lot as a little kid, and so I like always attached to stories where a character is isolated but looking for a home and like looking for where they belong. And like, I mean, Rey Skywalker immediately became one of my favorite characters in all of Star Wars. Just immediately. I was like, oh, I get this person. I get them immediately. And I feel like their story is being told fantastically.
Yeah, it's beautiful. I love it. All right, which brings us to the next question. Is nuance dead? Did the internet kill it? Did TikTok kill it? What happened? Where did we go wrong?
I think expectations killed it. I think.
Ooh.
I think we all, no matter what side, especially I want to say the expectations for the sequel trilogy killed it. I think everybody wanted something. Everybody wanted something different when they heard of a sequel trilogy coming to Star Wars, and I think people who were Anakin stans that would forgive him for anything wanted to see another Anakin on screen with Rey, and they didn't get that. I think people who maybe wanted a new and fresh telling of Star Wars that wasn't kind of a carbon copy of the original trilogy, maybe. I think expectations killed nuance.
That's a good way to put it. I think that there was a desire from a lot of the fandom, and then I think to an extent from filmmakers as well, and has been, this is not just a Star Wars thing, it's like a Marvel, a DC, and everybody think to please everyone. And sometimes in the desire to like, oh, this group can't be pleased, it's like, hey, maybe that group would have been happy 3 years from now after sitting on it and thinking about things again. But also not everybody needs to be happy. Some people can say, oh, this thing's not for me, I'm gonna move on to the next thing.
Right.
But yeah,
I can see that as well. How about y'all, Erin, Natasha?
I don't know. Go.
You go.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. I would just go really quick. Yeah, I feel like I'm of two minds of this, and I think it's because I am. I'm going to be honest and be like, I don't know everybody's ages here in this group. I say that because I just remember, I have very clear memories of when the prequels came out and how people reacted to that movie or those movies. And oh man, ooh, making me feel real old right now. But I have a very clear.
Okay, I'm with you.
Oh yeah.
So when the sequel movies came out, to be honest, I was just like, I don't know, this feels like it's just happening again. But it felt more intense because there's more access to different platforms for people to be able to be loud.
Of course.
So yeah, I don't know if things have like changed so drastically. I just think that there's just more opportunity for the loudest subset of like the toxic side of the fandom to be able to say the things that are like
Agreed.
bothering them.
Yeah.
And like, I guess also just like another just kind of quick thought I have is before the sequels came out and I really engaged more on like Twitter and Reddit in terms of Star Wars like fandom stuff, most of my engagement was people that I like met at cons and like just like my in-person circle of folks. And I didn't even know that the fandom had this issue until I got on Reddit and I was like, wow, okay. There's a whole thing going on here. So yeah, I guess I don't really know if I have like a fully formed idea, but like it's weird.
Time out. I found fascism Reddit for Star Wars. I didn't know that was a thing. I didn't know that. Like,
Wow.
there was a fascism.
I imagined that was all that Star Wars Reddit was. Like, you described Star Wars Reddit, I'd be like, some of those shapes aren't allowed on TV.
Oh my god. That was a
Let me-
scary rabbit hole to fall into. Oh my god.
Speaking of which, I feel like, I think like Star Wars helps us, kind of make sense of the world around us, or at least it did growing up. And I feel like specifically during the sequels coming out, which a lot of the complaints are identical, word for word, the same thing people said about the prequels, literally word for word.
Agreed.
And it's creepy, but there is also this thing where I'm seeing people's personal politics become wrapped up in like outside stuff. So like, had the Me Too movement not been happening the same time The Last Jedi came out, I feel pretty confident like responses to certain things might have been different,
Nah, they would have still called her Mary Sue. They would have still been calling her Mary Sue. They were looking for that group was looking for that opportunity. They were waiting for that opportunity. A heroine? Oh my god, what a woman! They were waiting.
This
They
is
were
true.
waiting.
I think the hate that is more amplified by Me Too and Last Jedi is towards Haldo. Because I remember when Last Jedi came out, and a lot of people were like, well, this character's not in the right, this is a women empowered, you're just a gimme thing. It all felt like people were funneling their frustration about Me Too and Weinstein onto, Haldo must be an overcorrection for that, even though it was...
She's a purple-haired feminist. Literally.
Which you love. That's
Which
the
you
best
love.
type.
I am a purple. You can't see it, but I am a purple-haired feminist.
The world needs more of you.
Well, I thought like that's interesting too, because I feel like that conversation when you're talking about people's personal politics comes in so often with the Jedi Order. A big reason that I would say that I'm not as interested in the Jedi Order, a lot of it is like my own personal feelings on like my religion and like with specifically like I know people apply a lot of their kind of Western religion stuff onto the Jedi Order. Like I was Catholic, so yeah, like some of that stuff sticks out to me, and I think that's where like with that you lose some of the nuance because people are projecting their own feelings onto that and not realizing.
As soon as I saw you cosplaying as Daredevil, I was like, yeah, I understand that.
Yeah. And like that's a big reason like I have issue with the High Republic has kind of like changed that, but the High Republic is also a very different Jedi Order than the one we see in the prequels. But yeah, like I think, and it's funny because the sequels were my Star Wars. Like that was The Force Awakens was the first one that I saw, so I really like
Oh wow, you had a completely fresh.
Yeah, like the sequels, Rogue One, Solo is really like what I consider like my era of Star Wars. So I feel like I have like, and like some of the other people who I know that were introduced to Star Wars through the sequels, like I spend quite a bit of time like talking about the nuances of them and the other like anthology movies and stuff. And yeah, it is interesting to see like people who, yeah, with the prequels, like people saying like, oh, like, or watching how long it took for people to add that nuance to the prequels. And now I'm waiting to see how long it will for the sequels. I feel like most people just say it's till another trilogy comes out. But it's interesting to see that like when, I honestly think depending on when you come into Star Wars or what you come into Star Wars on, and if you like it, then that's what you're gonna kind of apply the most like nuance to, because that is kind of like your Star Wars. I mean, I think I think that happens a lot with like, you know, people who came in on the Clone Wars when they were a kid. Like that was their first Star Wars, and how much they love that show and how much people dissect that and the different arcs and the different characters, even all these years later.
You said something that was really fascinating to me, where you mentioned how like, oh, you know, how long is it going to be until people defend the sequels, probably till another trilogy comes out, and it makes me realize like a lot of what we defend is comparative. People learn that they are defensive of something when suddenly there's something to compare it to that they want to protect it for. So like a lot of the vocally pro-prequel crowd, pro-prequel crowd wasn't as vocal until suddenly it's like, well, you know, the prequels were better than this. So I like the prequels in comparison. So that's a fascinating point.
I mean, I was ridiculed into the ground for liking the prequels. So I felt
were
like
in the trenches defending the prequels every day.
But you know what's funny though? And I'm not someone that if I don't like something, I spend all my time talking about it. But I didn't watch the Clone Wars for years because I didn't like the movie, and I didn't like the art design. I thought everyone was too tall and too angular. Then Rebels comes out and people are like, oh, I can't get into the art. And I'm like, did I sound like this? God, I hate me. What a douchebag. No, it's cyclical and it's hilarious to me.
I want to ask, by the way, and anybody else who had an experience of coming into Star Wars later, because I found Star Wars at the same time as a pacifier. Like, there's no memory of life without Star Wars in my brain. Even though it's an early memory, I remember when the first special edition VHSs came out. So, like, what is the experience of finding, for anyone who can answer this, finding something you like and then discovering that there are a bunch of people telling you not to like it, or that you're wrong about having discovered this thing is good? Like, that sounds so bizarre to me.
I mean, like, because I deal with it a lot, and I've noticed that a lot of people, in my comments, I get the kind of, well, like, if you were a fan then, or like, you're a newer fan, so like, whatever. But like, honestly, because like, I watched it and I didn't really become immersed in the Star Wars fandom until I like quarantine. So that's also it is like I saw kind of the online discussion and like general like public reaction to things like The Last Jedi and Solo and stuff like that, but I wasn't in the fandom. And then when I got in the fandom, I was kind of just so like set in like, oh, I like Force Awakens is my favorite Star Wars movie, and I like this. So like, I just was kind of like, oh, whatever. I don't really care, but it is a weird experience having people kind of constantly invalidate my opinion because they think that because of when I came in or the fact that I, you know, everyone has their biases. I'll admit, like, I am biased towards like the probably the films that came out then because they were my first and a lot of memories attached to them. But like, yeah, I just like, it's weird to get that and to act like I don't know Star Wars as well just because of that. Yeah, I'm not a real fan, but I don't know. I mean, I've learned to ignore it for the most part. Just kind of be like, yeah, okay, whatever. The block button is free for some people on that page. So
I didn't even realize there was hate for like Star Wars, like for the Phantom Menace came out when I was 8 years old, and I was head over heels for it. But I was in an environment where you couldn't say out loud that you liked Star Wars because you would have gotten bullied for that, or you know what I mean? I probably would have got put in a locker or something silly, right? So my love for Star Wars went like undercover for years. So I didn't really find out there was a hate for the prequel trilogy until I had a social media presence. Like until I got active on TikTok, I had no idea that people hated the prequels. But by that time, the sequels were out and people were just loud and ranting about it. So I was like, oh my God, this has all been going on this whole time. It was a shock to my system. I was like, okay.
Well, with what you were saying, one of the things I find is really funny about that conversation about like, because I've gotten, oh, your favorite's The Last Jedi, you must be a new fan, and I'm like, well, you know, I feel like Captain America for a second. Like, before we get started, does anyone want to get off? No, all right. But to me, that actually works the opposite. I think that if you are brand new and you watch all of it and it all works together, that means it all works together, and it's you sitting with and making 20 years of headcanon that is the impediment. You know what I mean? Like, I think it's exact opposite, but I don't know. Who am I?
I agree.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, so to jump into like the meat of it, there are certain characters that just don't get, you know, I've been in the trenches with this with Mace Windu for a long time. Actually, no, I made a tweet, and I got some like personal hate from like people DM'd me like, what was this about? I made a tweet and I said, Pong Krell walked so that Anakin could run. And
you're a brave man.
Because you know, Pong Krell is like one of the most hated characters in Star Wars, but everything that Pong Krell did and Anakin did, but worse. Everything. And people were like, oh, well, he didn't care about the clones. It was like, when Anakin became Vader, he would just murk stormtroopers for no reason.
He
like,
killed most of the Inquisitors. Literally, they were on his side.
He was training them and just chopped off one of their legs. And he's like, you should have been quicker. And he like walks off. And you're like, Jesus Christ. You know, and Pong Krell's like, I'm doing this so that I can join Count Dooku. And then, like, I don't know, all the things are there. And it's just fascinating that it just can't be seen. So, Em, when you made that post, it really resonated with me. So I'd like you to kick it off. If there's a character that you want to start with that just doesn't get the nuance, and we'll all jump in on it. Oh, yeah.
I guess probably not surprising. I guess I'll start with Saw Gerrera. I was definitely one of those people who I kind of just a little bit took part in that Saw Gerrera slander. But after, you know, immersing myself more in his story, I just realized that like he doesn't ever get the nuance that he deserves. And this is both from the story and from fans, to be fair. The story really loves to villainize Saw Gerrera. They love to make Saw Gerrera their rebel villain. Yeah. When, in my opinion, I have wide opinions that probably like have to do with like political theory and like this idea that I won't get too heavy in, but there was Frantz Fanon's idea that to get out of the colonizer can colonized using violence against the colonizer is sometimes necessary to get out from under them. And I think
100%.
if you look at Saw Gerrera through that lens, his character makes so much sense. And I think people just, I think I said this in the video I made, people don't take into account the trauma that he's suppressed. You know, Anakin, we talk about so much how Shmi died and that affected him so much. Saw watched his sister die right in front of him. How do you think that affected him and his actions? Saw has spent years of his life fighting a fascist government, and that has taken a toll on him physically, we see. So imagine if he physically looks like that, what his mental and emotional state is like. Right. And like, you know, why he is so paranoid and why he is so defensive and, you know, willing to maybe sacrifice more than the rest of the alliance. And I think it's unfortunate that maybe the most nuance that Saw Gerrera is given is in Rebel Rising, which I love. And I love that book. And I feel like, especially viewing Saw through this lens of his relationship with Jyn really helps, even if it is flawed and he is not the best father. But most people just aren't going to get that because it's a young adult book from 2017 that you can really even rarely find in like bookstores anymore. And you just don't, I feel, get the same impact as reading it on Wikipedia. And I just feel like, you know, part of that is like, it's frustrating to me how people do not view Saw, how often the story almost intentionally tries to draw parallels between Vader and Saw, and yet Vader gets all the nuance and Saw doesn't. From fans.
Why do you believe that? Like, what do you believe the source of that difference is? Why do people find that?
His skin. I think it's because he's black. I think it's because he's black. I think it's because he's the black extremist, and they put him against often Mon Mothma, who is this like nice white lady. And I think that is the difference. I think that's the big difference. And once again, I think the story also really does that. I don't know if there has been a black person who has written Saw Gerrera's character, and I can't help but think how different he would be if that was allowed to happen. And also, just to be fair, if we got a story through his point of view, we never see Saw Gerrera through his own perspective. It's only through other people. It's through other lenses of other stories, and we've never really gotten into Saw Gerrera's head to say, you know, who is he? Why? What does he believe? Does he view himself in a certain way? Does he think sometimes he goes too far? Whatever. And also, like, I get, you don't have to like Saw Gerrera. I get it. No. And I get his story is also hard to consume because it's split up against like 10 different forms of media, and he pops up everywhere. But he is given like 5 minutes of screen time and then gets rushes off. But like, sorry. So that makes it hard to consume, and I think hard to really get his, and we also have big chunks of his narrative missing. There's a big chunk of his story missing between him, like I think it's Jedi Fallen Order and him saving Jyn and Bad Batch. There's a chunk of it missing between him leaving Jyn and where we see him in Rebels that I think would be very impactful to his story, and especially in what ends up being his kind of fall into paranoia, and kind of what he's had to deal with. But yeah, and I mean, like I said, I used to really participate in the Saw slander, and I still don't love how he abandoned Jyn Erso because I feel like that was real bad. But even there, I understand the nuances of it. I understand what he means when he was saying he was trying to protect her, and I understand why he ended up choosing the cause over her, because, you know, yeah, she is just one girl, and Saw is trying to take down a huge government. But I don't think that you not liking a character means that you can just ignore all of the nuance that they have and all of the elements that make up their character and the things that happen to their character that make them make the decisions they do. We are seeing
Especially when you worship other characters for some of the same things, if not worse things.
Worse
Yes.
things. Worse things. It's evidence of patriarchal white supremacy that white male characters are defended for doing things that are straight up supposed to be villain arc material, while the sympathetic characters who are women or people of color get no benefit of the doubt, even though they're supposed to be a sympathetic character in that moment. There is nothing supposed to be sympathetic about Anakin when he slaughters the sand people in Attack of the Clones. We're supposed to be on Padme's side, experiencing shock and horror, like, oh my god, what's he done? Who am I
was in the
sleeping
trenches.
Right.
Tressel can confirm I was in the trenches when I put up that post about my Anakin slander. They were coming out of the woodworks. But he lost his mother. But what would you do? What do you mean? I wouldn't slaughter an entire village.
I had a comment conversation with someone one time about Saw, and they were like, well, Saw, we see him like being mean or hurting characters that we like are heroes. And I think they were in the context of Rebels and Sabine and the Ghost Crew. And I was like, hey, do you remember when Vader tortured Leia and then held her while her planet was blown up and she lost everyone she ever known or loved? When he cut off Luke's hand and then he froze the love of Leia's life in carbonite. Like, what is, so if keep the same energy is my thing. It's like, if that's your criticism of Saw Gerrera, where is that for Anakin and Vader?
That energy.
And they basically tried to write it off, and they were like, and I was like, you know, in Bloodlines we learned that like Leia still has like lasting trauma from that. Yeah. And they just kind of brushed that off. And I was like, no, you don't. If you're going to sit here and say that Saw Gerrera is bad because he was mean to Sabine and Ezra, then I want you to look me in the eye and tell me that Vader is fine.
It's the impossible ethical standards of patriarchal white supremacy. You have to be perfect. You any minority character, you got to be completely perfect. Can't mistreat anybody. Don't hurt a fly. But I can't help but identify with this white guy who has no self-control. I'm sorry.
I had somebody try to describe to me what anger was. They put the Webster dictionary definition of anger to me to justify why him slaughtering a fucking, can I curse on here? Slaughtering a village, men, women, and children, non-combatants, was justified. And I was like, are you serious? Even went so far as to talking about my military status. Like, they got to the point of saying that I wasn't a real Marine because I didn't see.
What do you think a Marine is?
Literally deployed. Like, what? Oh my god! Well, I can't imagine the headcanon you have to wrap yourself around to be in that space, to even frame those words that come out of your mouth. Like, that's powerful. That's powerful.
And another thing that kind of comes to mind, Monty in the chat, British accents also means villain to many.
Except for Ewan McGregor.
Except for Space Jesus.
But
sorry, I shaved my beard. I would have had the cosplay.
No, what kind of comes? Well, the first thing I thought of was like when you see how ragged Saw looks, and you're like, well, if black don't crack, how much stress is he under if he looks like that? You know, like.
He doesn't have an age, but if he's only as old as Forrest, he was only like 50.
Yeah.
He has been through it.
Shout out to Forrest Whitaker.
You know, but I also think there's a lot of things that other media also just portrays to us often. You know, like there's always the cop who's a renegade who is like breaking the laws and breaking the rules, and like their commanding officer is like, put your badge on my desk, give me your badge and your gun, and they heroically still investigate and like break laws, but it saves the day, so it's okay. And I feel like that mentality also flows into like, whoa, this is what I'm used to seeing, so now it's okay. I know it's.
I blame all cultural problems on Dirty Harry. I really do. It's a good movie that really fostered a trope of like, hey, this absolutely unethical individual has the right idea and is validated in any choice that they do moving forward. And what's their credential? That they're sorry, you know what? I'm actually going to rein myself in from how political I was about to be just then. I'm gonna tone that down. I know I'm pretty sure everybody would agree, but I'm still gonna tone it down.
Yeah, I guess something that's actually been kicking around in my head. I'm gonna go back to Rose Tico because I always do, and Padme actually. I think what I feel very frustrated by is the idea that we have these characters that are really rooted in like compassion, in care, in empathy, and like those characters are treated like uninteresting, or they're treated as stupid for being compassionate. And I think that's something I think a lot about. As I reflect on how people look at these characters and who is given grace and who isn't. You know, I think a lot about how people will bend over backwards. You know, we've kind of gone over it a bit, but people will bend over backwards to make every excuse for Anakin under the sun. Like they will argue you into the ground about like how nothing is ever Anakin's fault. But somehow it is like Padme's fault that like she didn't do more to like stop like Anakin, but Anakin's not responsible for any of the things that he actually did. So like
Padme is stupid for being compassionate towards Anakin and ignoring red flags. But when Luke does it, when Luke is compassionate and forgives him, he's a hero, and we love that. And it's like
that's a big one.
And then what's the difference between those two characters?
Because I had to challenge my own self about that, because I made that same argument about Padme, and then somebody pointed out the same thing, and I was like, shit. I had to challenge myself, like, wait a minute, right? I'm being biased. I need to back up.
Well, it's so.
I made a joke about it, and I was absolutely kidding. But like the people that the joke invited into the comments, and I was like, oh.
You gotta be careful.
Oh yeah, we're on this side of TikTok. Oh yeah.
what happened?
I think that brings up a great point about what happens to nuance online. Is that the way that like every website algorithm works, from Google to YouTube to TikTok, is that it rewards extreme opinions that you agree with. So, you know, like if I put out a take, everyone who finds that take, who agrees with it strongly or disagrees with it strongly, are going to be the ones that make that blow up. And it's more likely to be agreed with or disagreed with if I'm very absolute in that take. The less nuance I have, the more likely it is to blow up. And all of the YouTube accounts that blew up during the sequel trilogy were the ones providing the least amount of nuance, because they had the most opportunity for people to agree or disagree. And I think that's the biggest place where nuance dies, is through the reward of an absolutist take online.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it is so rewarded that it hurts me. And like, it's like I could be a full-time content creator if I just gave in to the dark side.
Oh,
in it.
Oh.
That's what I was like, if I sat there and just every week put out a video that was like, Rogue One is the most underrated Star Wars movie, underrated masterpiece, I could be doing numbers. But instead I want to sit there with my nuanced Rogue One takes and my lengthy discussions on the film, and people don't like that.
I relate to the dark side, and I found myself defending the Jedi Order during that era, and I was like, no, I don't even want to be doing this, but here I am making arguments for Yoda, making arguments for Obi-Wan, and that's not who I am. But holy moly,
Like, they're wrong, but you're not gonna do them like that, you know? Like,
I'm like, wait, it's not Obi-Wan's fault that he didn't recognize the fact that he was basically training an egotistical genocidal maniac. he had no clue. He was a child himself, and I stepped back and like, I don't even. So man, I was like, I'm talking about how people like, well, if they'd have just made him the rank of master. What do you mean? Why would they make him the rank of master? Why would they do that? They had no reason
Placate
to do
him.
that at that point.
Just placate him. No.
Yeah. It's wild. People are more willing to accept that the Jedi are responsible for their own genocide than like the fact that Anakin was a grown man that made the decisions that he made and led him down this path. You can accept that there are things that were happening in Anakin's life that were awful and traumatic, and I'm sorry that he had the life that he had. But like, ultimately, you are responsible for your own actions.
I turned to the light.
Yeah.
I'm reading the comments.
Well, yeah, Anakin's a cautionary tale, and I wonder if some of the defense for him is people identifying too much with that cautionary tale and not wanting to learn the lesson. Because the cautionary tale of Anakin is that he didn't ask for help and he kept secrets. Like the biggest mistake that he makes in the Clone Wars is the choice to keep these secrets, and also to chase ambition. Or not Clone Wars, Attack of the Clones. And his combination between ambition and secrecy really drive him all the way to Sidious. And that's something that toxic masculinity would never let a man confront. Like, hey, if you ask for help and if you let go of your need for ambition, you can live a happy life. If you let go of the need to be a Jedi Master and just be a Jedi, if you let go of the need for secrecy and just ask your friend Obi-Wan for help, these things can be solved very easily. But instead we lack that. These things that men are taught toxically to latch onto and take pride in are the things that the cautionary tale of Anakin would tell them to let go of.
It's funny because it wasn't until like recently, and I'll say within the last 3 years, that I've been able to cry. Because you don't ever cry, right? And I was proud of the fact, like, no man, I just take these feelings and I just crush them like a goddamn man. And you're like, oh, that's probably not good.
That's not good at all.
That's why women live longer.
100%. 100%. That is why women live longer. Also, we do stupid shit.
Exactly. We don't know when to quit.
Don't know when to quit.
Listen, me and my friends, we used to drive around town, find bushes, and jump into them. Are you trying to tell me that was not a rewarding pastime? Because I learned lots of life skills in there.
Once climbed onto
Don't jump too deep into it if it's a thorn bush.
Oh no.
Don't jump out of moving cars. I learned I could do backflips. That was cool. Yeah, no, we're
well, I think it's so interesting too when you bring up like the toxic masculinity too, because I almost feel like maybe too that's why in some cases a lot of these people are more willing to forgive Anakin as well, and to just kind of accept that final, like not saying that that's bad, but like kind of accept that final. But then when you look at like they're still mad at Bo-Katan, even though Bo-Katan has openly said that she regrets her actions. She is clearly living with the consequences of it, but she's still an entitled bitch who wants to roll Mandalore. Like,
Bo-Katan's an incredibly sympathetic character to me. Like, I have not watched the cartoons. I only have seen her through a portrayal in Mandalorian. But from everything that I've been given, this is this character who was raised with ideals and systems and expectations, not unlike, toxic masculinity and patriarchy, not unlike, religious expectations, actually very literally religious expectations.
Right.
And this is a person who, there is a sympathy there, even if this person is ultimately a bad person, and ultimately makes some pretty objectively bad decisions in the end. I don't know. I don't have the context. We don't know where the story's going yet. But even if these things are true, I do sympathize with what brought her to this point and the expectations, ideals, and upbringing that were out of her control that have shaped this road.
Right.
I love that take a lot, because that's really the crux of it. Is she was raised to believe that this is what success means. This is what strength means. This is how things should be. You guys are all doing it wrong.
Right.
And so she overthrew her sister, and succeeded in all the rules. And what happened? A Sith Lord became ruler because having the best fighter rule the planet is a crap idea.
Might not be the best.
Oh, I never thought about this like that. And then after that, it's just damage control, and I love that.
Right.
For that's, once you achieve that, your idealism, and then you realize, oh, this was rotten at its very core. What do you do? And we see her dealing with that.
And that makes for an awesome character. That makes for a complex character.
Yeah, and that's sad too, because like then so many people just write it off because they're not willing to examine it, or like I found too, like a lot of people take what they've heard about Bo-Katan or saw or whatever other character online, and then they run with that as their point without actually checking to see if that's what the media is telling us, if that is what their actual story arc is.
Right.
Well, the horrible thing that this is going to sound incredibly unnuanced, but I worry that it's really the case, is that I think there just are a lot of people who jump at the opportunity to finally have found that, that bitch, that woman who's, see, this is the one, this is the feminazi, this is exactly what I've been saying women are like all along, and they're not going to look further than that because they feel the success of having found that example. Because that's the discourse I see around Bo-Katan a lot, and I'm like, that doesn't add up to me. It's the same discourse that happened like in a different way, but a similar tone around Carol Danvers in Marvel. It's like you just decided like, I recognize this about the type of woman I've always said was out there somewhere, and she's it. And I refuse to look further. You can't make me. It's my opinion.
Right. Right.
Yeah, I mean, when it comes to like Carol Danvers, I know how many of those same people that hate her like Goku.
Oh no.
I don't know. But again, that's the same. It's the same take just over and over again, and it's just funny how often it's happened, and how like it took me a long time to even notice it, and then I start looking backwards. So when it comes to the term like Mary Sue, for instance,
you mean Batman?
With prep time.
Batman is absolutely no, man. He wins because he knows 146 martial arts. I'm like, that doesn't make him 146. What does that even mean to you? He knows so many.
How many different ways can you throw a punch? Like, I don't.
But first time I remember hearing that was used for Ahsoka when she first came out, and then second time, because I was reading the expanded universe books, and I was on the force.net back in the day. I realized this is being used a lot for Mara Jade. And then in those books, spoiler alert, Mara Jade dies. And my favorite character, Jaina Solo, they started saying about her. Like, oh, I used to like Jaina, but now she's becoming like Mara Jade and like a Mary Sue. And then it also happened again the day that Cara Dune joined. I don't know if you remember that, but she fights Din and essentially beats him, and people were pissed. There's so many headlines. Oh man, you have your guy in armor, he gets beat up by this girl, and you're like, I know, now the same people praise her. It's
It
just
would have
weird.
happened in real life too. She would have iced him in real life.
Yeah.
Like, how do you not look at that and go, doesn't matter the armor. That she's taking him down. That
I mean, I feel like Mary Sue at this point to me is just, it's become one. I mean, it's sexist, and I will not. I don't take it anymore. But like, it's just become to be woman who is good at things. Fennec Shand is a Mary Sue because she beat Cad Bane. Rey is a Mary Sue because she could kind of hold up in a fight against Kylo. I don't know. Jin is a Mary Sue because she can take out 10 stormtroopers. Whatever. It is just.
Right. But by their arguments, we have male characters who are Mary Sues, and we don't bat an eyelash.
Yeah,
right, because it's somehow okay that Sherlock Holmes knows everything and can also box and fence.
So annoying.
But Rey can hold a saber, so that's where the.
How dare she? How dare she? We saw her with a stick the entire movie. Those are not the same thing.
I
How
think
dare you say a stick is a lightsaber?
I think the thing with Rey that always like blows my mind is like she's literally a scavenger and like has like dealt with like machine parts like her whole like life, and people
Right.
could not accept that she could figure out how to like work
How
a
to
ship
bypass
at
the
all.
hyperdrive. How to
Like
bypass
right,
the
like
hyperdrive, yeah.
it makes no sense to me because I'm like, you, based on like what we have been presented about this character, it absolutely makes sense.
And Han is
Yeah.
not a mechanic. That's not in his makeup. So he would not know. That's right. That's perfect. He would not know. Well, wait a minute. You
this
could
is
do
like-
that.
Han
That-
being bad at fixing the Falcon is his plot line.
Yes.
Oh yeah, Han being bad at everything except for smiling his way out of problems is the character of Han Solo from moment number one.
Oh, and also, so someone in the chat, Assad Shield, Shahid, reminded me of a video I've been meaning to make. That I was tricking the whole. So I made a video recently about Daredevil popping up in No Way Home and getting everyone's reaction to it, and a lot of people are that's a trap. I wanted to see people's reaction first because I can't wait to point out that. Yeah, it was unearned by Spider-Man. It was random. It takes you out of the movie. It was unnecessary. It was great. I loved it. It's the same thing as the A4 scene in Avengers Endgame. It's the same. It's the same thing. The difference is because I had people in my theater looking over at me like, who is that? What is this? What does that mean? And you know, that was put in there for the people who knew the character, who watched the Daredevil show. It was put in there for them. If you didn't watch it, it wasn't for you, and that's okay. Same thing.
Yep.
I see the same thing.
Yep.
Yeah, and I think
I had to
there-
come off my high horse about that Endgame scene because I see the comment about that, the Endgame scene where the women come together and there's the girl power moment. I remember being so frustrated, not because I just felt like Captain Marvel could have just taken the fucking thing and just flew like she did. I felt like the moment was unneeded, but I had to remind myself that moment wasn't for me. That wasn't put there for me. It's time for me to step back. I've been watching male characters through this whole movie do their thing. This scene was made specifically for a specific audience, and I can step the fuck back and shut up for 5 minutes.
I mean,
Yeah.
because there's legitimate critiques of that scene. I think that scene is a great
Oh,
example.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Hey, Marvel, you shoved all these women on screen. None of them have interacted. How many of your, I don't
Yeah.
love the Bechdel test, but how many of your movies pass the Bechdel test? Tell me
How do-
right now, quickly,
how do these
many of
characters
these
know
characters
each
have
other?
interacted for more than 5 minutes. But for me, even as like a woman, like I was like, fuck yeah. Like, I don't know. It's like, yeah, it's like I was really hyped by that scene. The first time I saw it, I enjoyed it. And I know now, like looking back to it, it's like I can't help but think of all those, like the little girls who are gonna look at that and be like, oh, that's so cool. Like there's like all my favorite characters like together. And like that's who that scene is for. And you can talk about how it's unearned because Marvel doesn't do that great with female characters, but while also acknowledging how
But the
important
thing-
that scene is.
100%.
The wild thing is that there's like another the movie beforehand had a completely earned woman power scene like that no one's ever complained about on the battlefield in Wakanda when they're like, I love that moment. No one ever brings up like, they're all on screen together. It's because it isn't a splash panel moment. It's why did the women get their splash panel?
Right.
And I have an issue with that moment. That is an issue I actually have with several parts in the battle and Endgame, which is I used to direct theater, and my issue is strictly spatial. And it's the same problem I have with Ant-Man during that fight, where I'm like, where is Ant-Man? He is in several places. It does not make sense. And I have there's a couple other characters that just like the only time where anybody like makes sense is during the glove handoff scene from Barton to T'Challa to Spider-Man. That's the only time where where they are on the battlefield makes any sense. And my complaint was that I felt that this is such a big moment of these women all being on screen. I was like, Marvel, you could have spent 2 more days in the green screen putting them in that place physically. Because I was like, but it's the same exact complaint I had with Ant-Man. I'm like, how did you get there from there? How did she get there from there? But that's a complaint I have with the whole fight, not just that moment.
I keep seeing like, why is Ant-Man regular size here and he's big over there and he's on the same screen twice? What is this? No, Escape 100%. From Reality Film says it's fair to say it's unearned, but we need to bring that energy with everything. Also, sometimes cool unearned moments should just be allowed, and I agree with that. And that's one of the whole purposes of the conversation. Is that's the nuance. I can eat a sandwich and be like, oh, I don't really like this. I would have used this type of cheese, or I would have replaced this with this. And it doesn't mean that this is trash and I should hate it. Like there is, we can adjust. And if you hate this thing here and not there, then why? That's.
Why is it good versus bad, hate versus love? Why can't it be, I like this thing, it can still be better?
Yeah.
Oh, that was my whole take on my last couple of videos about the spin, right? The spin that we all know fell into just raw civil war, and the comparison between Din's spin versus the spin that we saw from what is his name? The modder?
Yes, I want to say Criff, but I know that's not it. I can't remember his name.
I understood that the spin was silly, right? I understood why it was there. I understood who directed it, who decided to keep it. I just felt that the way it was shot could have been a million times better, right? But I understand people's right to critique what they love, right? And I also understand that some people who are going to take SCAD. Some people want to hide their prejudices in critiques, and I understand that that's also going to happen.
100, yes.
This is how I feel when so many men do this. They go, well, I just want to see well-written female characters. You're just being sexist. Plainly, all the things you just listed are sexist, but sure, hide behind you want to see well-written female characters, and then ignore the women or like in your comments who are saying, well, I thought that they were well written, or I really identified with their character, and you're a man, so you might have missed some of these like nuances that really make me identify with her. I feel like that happens quite a bit with Rey, and also I could say Bo-Katan, because I know like a lot of women really like connect with Bo-Katan. But like that, it bothers me all the time. It's like people hide these like. And I think it's the same thing with like, you could just say any other diversity. I want diversity, but I don't want it to be forced. What does that mean?
What does that mean?
I want the right person.
There are less white
right person for the
people.
job. I want to make sure the right person gets hired. I love that. We would have to make sure the right person gets the job.
They want everything consumable under a white context, the same way men want women consumable through a patriarchal context. Like it's why for white audiences, Green Book is acceptable racial media, while Do the Right Thing isn't. It's because it delivers it in the context of whiteness versus in the context of humanity, or God forbid, the context of blackness. I have a really big hot take about how people take in different types of strong, female characters and what they find acceptable. And I've been like debating making a TikTok about this, but I think that if you look at the pattern of when men say, "Oh, I'm not sexist. I like these other strong female characters that I've approved of," they're all female characters that get delivered to the audience as sexual consumables at some point or another. Ripley at the end of the first Alien, Leia in all of the trilogy movies, but specifically in Return of the Jedi. The one that made me think of this was Metroid, Samus. Samus is delivered in the bikini at the end of the first game. All of these characters, Sarah Connor gets a sex scene in one movie and scantily clad in the second movie, even if it's like it's strong sexy clad, but still like it's 1980s version of Xena Warrior Princess. And men approve of these things because it's femininity being delivered to them as women, the consumable object. And the hot take I have there is that these men will say, "Well, of course I support strong women. They can sleep with me whenever they want."
I think to add on to that, I've noticed that too. It's a lot of times when women if they're not presented in a more sexual context, it's when they have more masculine traits. I find that a lot with a lot of men say, "Oh, well, I like Jyn Erso," and I'm like, okay, but like Jyn Erso has a lot more masculine traits than someone like Rey, even down to the way that she dresses in almost the exact same way as her male lead. So like it's like that, like because they see more of the masculine traits, then that's a good thing, even though like I could argue that like that ignores a lot of like the vulnerability in certain characters who have more masculine traits. But like that makes them comfortable, and then they think that like, oh well, because like or maybe they can identify with them more, and then that's a good female character. But then someone who isn't, like Rey, who kind of falls outside of like the, either sexualized or a more masculine female character is
exactly. Femininity can only come if it's consumable for a man, but Rey, Carol Danvers, and Wanda Maximoff are all allowed to keep their femininity without ever being presented to the audience as a consumable for men. Specifically, like the one that gets close to being, masculine or like losing their femininity, you might think is Carol Danvers, but she's presented sapphic, like very sapphic, which is a multi-thousand-year-old presentation of femininity. So
another character I think about too is Ahsoka, because I remember the early days of Ahsoka, because if we want to talk about being in the trenches defending a character, like people hated her, like hated Ahsoka in the early days, and it's because people really hate not all people, but certain men in the fandom really hate teenage girls, and that is real. And like in the early days of Ahsoka, both in the movie, which I admittedly also didn't love, and the first season of the Clone Wars, Ahsoka was very much a teenage girl, and she like very much acted the part. And it really wasn't until they kind of gave her more of like a warrior persona in like later seasons that people loved Ahsoka all of a sudden. But yeah, it is it's really interesting to me what feels like digestible to people. But I think about Ahsoka a lot in that way.
And I also think when it comes to Ahsoka, things that made it easier is just her being surrounded by stronger male counterparts, And so I'm really curious on how the Ahsoka show is going to be treated, because she's always played second fiddle to whoever is with her in the story. And I'm just really curious to see how the fans are going to deal with that.
I have just like a little small hot take about like the Ahsoka show, and I will just say that I don't know who is going to be in the show officially or whatever, but whether it's rumored or confirmed or what have you, but the thought that Anakin will be in the show actually upset me. Like, I was actually kind of bummed about it. And I feel like a lot of people were so excited, and I was just like, I really want Ahsoka to be able to be her own person away from Anakin. That is what I would love to see. I would really love to see that at some point.
I can understand that.
It didn't upset me until I went on YouTube and didn't watch any videos on it. But in all the thumbnails for the videos, she was like in the background in the corner on something representing her own show. And it just felt weird.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I feel like, and I feel like that's a really real thing. I mean, and that's kind of valid also because, like, you know, we've seen some Book of Boba Fett a little. Like, you know, he was the star, and then as soon as Din and Luke showed up, immediately he was pushed back. He was not his own. I've had similar fears about Andor and people saying they really want the Ghost Crew in it. I feel like that's an immediate way to shove Cassian to the back of his own story when, like you're saying, like, he has played, I mean, he's only been in one thing, it's a little different than Ahsoka, but like he has only played second fiddle to
K2SO.
Take K2SO.
Right.
That's also why I was actually happy that they said K2SO was not going to be in the first season. I'm like, great, Cassian can shine on his own in this show then. That's cool. But like, yeah, it's like Cassian has only played second fiddle to like Jin or I guess just Jin. And like they deserve their chances to like really stand apart and have their own stories without their attachment to, like, I feel like in the case of like both Ahsoka being played by Rosario Dawson, it's like white people.
Mm-hmm.
Well, the other thing that gets like really frustrating is you worry that the writers are going to fall on the crutch of the character that they feel the most confident about. Like, I feel very much like, again, very much feel like that's what happened with Boba Fett. It's like, hey, we have all of these options for where to take this character. We're excited about all of these options, but we know Mandalorian. So when in doubt, hey, we'll just, as long as we can get to those Mandalorian episodes, we'll be good. And because that's when the show felt like it fully found its identity, is when it switched to a completely different protagonist. It's like, yeah, and it's like, okay, so does that, you worry, but as a writer, I can say that that's something that, you know, writers do sometimes do, where it's like, hey, you know, I'm not fully confident about this character. I know that the plot points are there. We'll just make the story revolve around this plot beat and then this following plot beat, but then you suddenly get the side character that you were really excited to have the whole time, and the show comes to life. Like, that's a very normal thing for a writer to do, and you worry that that's going to be the same thing with like Ahsoka and Anakin, where it's like, okay, they're not going to know what to do until suddenly Anakin comes around, because that's who they really wanted to write the whole time.
Right.
Yeah, it's I mean, speaking of that, there's a lot more things to consider when it comes to these depictions, because and I made a video about this a little bit earlier, because you have people who like, we typically see this happen against, you know, people of color and women, or any marginalized group, and I think when you call it out, you know, the lack of nuance leads people to believe that you're saying that we just hate all of these people, and that's not true. If you call out, you know, sexism in the Star Wars community, people think it means that, oh, you're saying I hate all women, but I like these women characters, therefore it cannot be true. And you're like, no, sexist people can have wives and daughters. They probably don't treat them well, or have very specific expectations of them that are problematic, but it doesn't mean you hate it. Like, it's not mutually exclusive. And when it, so that's just one aspect of it. And like you said, in the writer's room, if you have someone who is more comfortable writing this type of character, or they don't understand the nuance of writing that type of character, some of these characters don't get super well developed. I've seen people that complain that the fan base often ships male characters together, and I'm like, obviously, you didn't develop any female characters. They don't. There's no emotional ties to anyone. So obviously they're gonna ship those ones together.
Yeah. I feel like the
then,
Marvel universe all the way up through, until we got more from Wanda, it was more like, who do you want to see with Black Widow? Because there, unless you were going to ship two men together, you didn't have other options.
Mm-hmm.
And Black Widow, and they even kind of joked about this, but they wrote her personality to be whatever was necessary for the guy's development. She was like,
Yeah.
a
I was
mom
just about to say, whoever
sometime.
she was on screen with at
Yeah.
the moment.
She had no
She's a
agency.
Swiss Army knife of femininity, as seen by men.
Yeah, I think people miss that a lot when they talk. Like, I love Leia and I like Padme, but like I feel like people do miss that. Like, a lot of their point was they were on, like, Padme for sure. She was there to develop Anakin's character,
Yeah.
and you can see that most clearly in Revenge of the Sith, where any agency that she had, any
Gone.
personality traits, any ambitions of her own that we've been told that she hasn't shown that she has, are gone. And
Yeah.
the plot about her forming the rebellion is cut out because we don't have time.
She
for
was
that
a
right now.
teenager that held her own in the Senate. I'm just like, how do we just graze past that? How powerful this person was at such a young age, how much responsibility that she had to hold at such a young
Yeah.
age. It's
The conflicts that they would be feeling and the priorities that she would have in these situations all get sidelined for the development of, the white
for her creepy boyfriend.
Well, so
Right.
so she's like, they're all chained up. Her immediate thing is like, all right, I've already escaped. I'm up here. Like, she's just like, she's already kicking butt, already whipped out guns and is taking people down. Dies of sadness.
She dies of a 19th century ailment.
And people were like, well, she loved Anakin. I was like, yeah, she also loved being a senator. Like, I was like,
Well,
being
she
alive.
wasn't a senator anymore. Maybe she died of that sadness.
I was like,
I got voted out of office.
other things, and like, as much as I love Leia, like, most of her development comes through a romantic relationship with Han. That is the biggest role that she has, and being kind of like at the beginning, this like tension between Luke and Han, like that is so much of her character. And I think that the Padme books and the Bloodline and Leia Princess of Alderaan are prime examples of how these female characters can flourish when female writers are writing them. When you have somebody who understands those nuances and cares for these characters and seeing them being built up outside of their relationship with men and outside of their connection to other men.
Leia just watched her planet die, was tortured, then watches her planet die, and then she's like, oh, Luke, you lost that old hermit that you knew for like an hour and a half.
Let me comfort
I got your back. Poor guy. Let me give you a hug.
Hey, everybody talks about moments that they dislike in Star Wars and the prequels and the sequels, but I'll actually tell you, I think my most cringy moment in Star Wars is in my favorite Star Wars movie. I think my two favorites are Last Jedi and Return of the Jedi. And in Last Jedi, I have always hated the moment where Leia goes and like comforts Han or something. Like, it's right before the "he's my brother" moment where she's like, I think Luke's okay. Yeah, I've just got this sudden feminine sense that all of the men around me are all right. And you're like, and suddenly I was like, did she not care about anything else? Where's her?
Like, it's so weird.
That scene, that conversation between Holdo and Poe, like the initial "I know who you are, fly boy," it just came off kind of sexual to me. Like, I don't know who wrote that, and I don't know if they intended for it to come off that way, but it seemed like she wanted to sit on his face. Like, it didn't sound like, as somebody who's gotten their ass chewed out by a commanding officer for fucking up, I know what that conversation sounds like, and it does not sound like that person wants to sit on my face. Like, I don't like, who wrote that? Because I don't feel like it was a woman who wrote that scene.
I think it was someone who didn't have a lot of experience in aggressive managers or in commanding officers either, because it doesn't feel like it's. I think that is a complaint I have with Last Jedi, because it doesn't feel like a moment of reprimand, nor does it feel like a moment of education. It feels like this weird thing in the middle. Like when you're being reprimanded by a manager or a commanding officer, and tell me if I'm wrong, they don't care if you have more information, and they don't care about giving you a lesson. They're going to ream you, and you're going to be sent to your punishment. And so that moment, I was like, is she giving him a lesson or is she reaming him? Because it doesn't feel like either, quite.
Yeah, I could talk about that. I didn't understand that relationship, especially the way we get sold Poe. Like Poe is sold as like this ace pilot, but he's like the guy, right? And then all of that kind of just falls to the wayside, and he kind of just becomes this idiot. Like,
well, he's an ace pilot without a plane.
To be the idiot, like if he was always, but like pilots are very smart, very battle oriented, like human beings. You're not just put anybody in a cockpit, and you wouldn't sacrifice people for the sake of a small victory. That's just not how pilots operate. So to have that, and I guess that's a headcanon for me, because I know real pilots. So to see Poe be whittled away to that, in my opinion, simply to kind of, I guess, engineer the scene where Holdo has to reprimand him, is like, well, I feel like we could have got here. There's a better way we could have got here. Because now he just seems like an idiot. And then he tried to stage a mutiny. I was like,
it was the stupidest thing.
Yeah. I was like, oh, no. And they, I don't know. I guess we can leave that up for conversation, because the Poe Dameron that we got in The Force Awakens just didn't feel like the Poe we got in The Last Jedi.
Yeah. Yeah, I think like a lot of that is definitely valid. I think when I think about sort of the character development between The Force Awakens and The Last Jedi, one, I don't know, we talked earlier about like how a lot of us, because of our lived experience, we kind of imprint our experiences like on the people, like on the people and the characters that we see. And we just didn't see a whole lot of Poe, honestly, in The Force Awakens. Like, I think we made a lot of assumptions on very little about Poe. And I'll even agree, like when I watched The Last Jedi the first time, I was just like, bro, I thought you were better than this. Like, I wanted better for you.
Well, he died originally. He died in the plane crash.
Yeah.
But they found him so charismatic. They're like, we gotta keep bringing this guy back. This guy tests too well.
Yeah. So yeah, I guess there's some of that. And then I think the reason why I have a little bit of grace for how kind of the weirdness and clunkiness and how Poe is written is because essentially the core of the whole story is about how all of these different people fail at like the things that they are trying to do. And that's sort of the point. I think that the way that they get there with some characters maybe aren't perfect. But I think that all of the characters needed to be able to fail. And
that's valid.
I thought that was great. And I really had wished that they had followed through with something better following that movie. But, you know, I will keep my opinions on The Rise of Skywalker.
I mean, the place that it comes down to me is that all of Star Wars is camp.
Yeah.
And regardless of how good any part of it is, they will be like, okay, we have to inject some camp in here. You know what I mean? Like, as serious as Empire Strikes Back, which, you know, between Last Jedi and Empire, those are my two favorite. That's why Yoda is in there. They're like, we can't have this be a straight movie, and some people didn't like that. They're like, there's a Muppet on screen. You know, the hell is going on? They're like the previous movie was, you know, was serious, and now there's a Muppet. Kermit the Frog is chilling there, but and so certain things like that don't draw me out because I I see it everywhere. You know what I mean?
Oh wow!
No disrespect to Kermit.
Oh, no.
Look,
Shout out to Kermit.
Like his ears.
what? Anytime Ian McDermott is on screen, he just chews the scene up, you know, and it's the best. But you're like, why is that guy so creepy? Like, I would have figured out who the Chancellor was, because every time it's like, that guy is trying his hardest to not smile right now. Y'all don't see that
right now.
Yeah,
So creepy.
this man is evil. I feel like the entire Star Wars legacy telegraphed itself so much in the first movie. With it was going always in this direction of camp. With two things. First of all, everybody always says, "Oh, it's grounded because it's actually a Western." It's like, are you kidding me? Westerns are so campy. Have you never watched a Western? The entire town goes inside so that two people can show down in the middle of the street and law comes down to one man. That is ridiculous. It's a campy genre. So that's the first one. But the second thing is they cast Peter Cushing in that first movie. They always knew they were going for a B horror, you know, campy 10-year-old audience, because that man was playing Van Helsing and you know, werewolf movies and stuff. Like, there was never going to be a grounded, full, straight, serious Game of Thrones Star Wars.
I mean, you have two droids bickering in the desert.
I think Fern made the point that, like, the only Rogue One, or the only Star Wars movie that doesn't really come off as camp is Rogue One. And I would say the campiest part of that movie is Krennic, because he's just so over the top dramatic. But I wonder how much of, like, Rogue One and that being more of the gritty movie has affected people's view of what Star Wars should be, because I love Rogue One for what it is, but I also know that like Solo, it was trying to not be like the Skywalker saga. It was trying to be a different kind of movie. It's a more gritty war movie. That's its thing. Solo was a heist adventure movie. That's its thing. Mando was a Western. Like, it's that in the anthology stuff shouldn't be what sets the tone. It's what breaks it. It's what adds something new to the campiness that we've seen in different ways. And yeah, like, as much as I love Rogue One, but like that Vader scene, I think has given people like kind of the same like perception of like, we should have a very violent rated R Vader movie. And it's like, but that's not what Star Wars has been.
It's the Joaquin Phoenix Joker of the Star Wars universe.
Yeah, like that's not what Star Wars.
Joaquin Phoenix Joker.
It's like that's
the last thing we need. That's the last thing Star Wars.
Please God, no.
Well, when people say it, I always kind of laugh, because I'm like, all right, things get rated R because of language, sexual content, and violence. And I'm like, the lightsaber cauterizes wounds, right? So it's not going to be like a whole bloody thing. It's Star Wars, so they don't cuss. They say like criff and stuff like that. So essentially, you just want Vader just banging people. Like,
yes, you get it. That's what we've all wanted. You tell me you watched Last Jedi and didn't think, they clearly cut out a steamy sex scene. Like, we have Eggy in the chat. She knows. Like, that was clearly on the cutting room floor, and we deserve it.
Honestly, I wish that were true.
Everyone knows the moment they decided not to kill Poe, he was going to be part of a throuple. It's going to be Poe and Rey and Finn. Beautiful little throuple. Great polyamory on screen, and they robbed us of that.
Give me the R-rated extended version.
Like, it's in the same way, like, I don't know, like, I would never want, like, I know Andor is going to be gritty or whatever. I would never want to see a rated R Andor. That's not what I want, because that just means that Cassian has to be sad all the time. Just means he gets nothing. And, like, that's what people miss. It's like, the Star Wars 2 is supposed to have this, like, joy and light in it, and like the main core message is hope. I don't want a depressing ass story where I just see Vader killing people for 90 minutes.
Some people want that.
The
genocidal maniacs want that.
You was weird. Okay.
The main messages of like hope and family and love that has always been at Star Wars core.
Yeah. Who
You know
can
what I
save
think
us
about?
in the future kind of thing.
So the Vader scene in Rogue One, which I love that scene, but like even that scene doesn't fit in the movie really.
No, not at all.
And
Why was he
to
there?
me, what that feels like is in Inglorious Bastards. It feels like the propaganda like film in that movie
Yeah.
of the sniper.
No, that's what
That's
it
what it
was.
feels like. It feels like
That's what it was.
they end up with just like
It was
pro
added
Empire
during reshoots.
propaganda.
It was added during reshoots, and I know they made a lot of changes. I think for the better during reshoots, but like clearly that was not maybe something that they originally thought was so essential to the story. If they're adding it in after the script and stuff had already been
Like-
written.
Like the movie's over, and then they're like, "But wait,
Like,
there's-
you know, what'd be
there's
cool? Let's add this. That touches on my biggest curiosity, though. Like, my biggest curiosity is about the newest wave of Star Wars. Is like I don't really have a lot of criticisms, but I have a lot of curiosity about the projects we didn't get or the projects that didn't like meet their fruition the original way. Whether it's what's his name who did Ford v Ferrari almost gave us a Boba Fett movie, or why am I blanking on his name? Colin Trevorrow almost did Duel of the Fates.
Duel of Fates.
Yeah.
I really want to know what Gareth Edwards' original Rogue One was going to end up like, partially because Gareth Edwards hasn't directed a single film since the reshoots of Rogue One. And I'm like, what happened to this man's artistic soul? He hasn't been able to lead a movie since.
But it's also interesting how
Dried
they
husk
didn't bring
somewhere.
it back for Andor. They went with Tony Gilroy, who was the screenwriter, and I think also from, if I'm remembering, did the reshoots, was really heavy.
He's
in
the writer of Michael Clayton, and he directed the reshoots.
Yeah, and I know,
He's
and
gonna
I
back the
part of
tank
that is
somewhere.
from what I've heard. Cassian had quite a bit added in reshoots, so maybe they were like, "Yeah, we want the guy who."
Yeah, this is the guy who like.
But yeah, it is interesting how they were like, how they were just kind of went away. I mean, Gareth Edwards still doesn't seem to be bitter because like he did an interview with Star Wars recently. He seems to still love it and like have a good time. But yeah, I don't think he's done much since. I don't know.
In retrospect,
I'm good.
In retrospect, his Godzilla is my favorite of the new Godzilla movies. Like, I know there was a lot of problems with when we see it in theaters. Like, oh man, show me the monster, stop cutting away. But like watching all three of the most recent ones like back to back, I'm like, okay, this is actually the best movie of them. And he's got a great eye. He's got maybe even two of them, and I want to see more.
Hey guys,
one
the
last thing I
wife
was
is
thinking.
flagging me down. I gotta go put my daughter to bed. It's 10 something here, so I gotta go.
Yes,
I appreciate it. Thank you for having
we
me.
are wrapping up right now. You want to
Oh.
just go ahead and let us know where we can find you and your awesome content, and if there are any closing thoughts you got.
Say it one more time.
Oh, just where we can find you and your content, and if you have any closing thoughts.
I have to follow all of you guys now. Chaco, you know I got you. Emma, I think I just started following you. I will find the rest of you guys. I am Inquisitor Akula, Inquisitor_Akula on TikTok. And closing thoughts. I love Star Wars, and I love any stint of Star Wars that makes the universe that much bigger and fills in the gaps. And I'm one of the people that feel like even though we love it, we can still have room to critique it. And I feel like we're kind of losing that as Star Wars. No matter what side of the avenue you're on, if you're defending against the bigotry, if you're for the bigotry, I still think we should be allowed to critique no matter what side of the avenue you're on if you love Star Wars.
Beautifully said. I agree. I hope we can quiet down the noise so we can actually have those conversations again, because I miss them, and I have them here all the time, so I appreciate y'all for coming out and all this stuff. But yeah, so we are gonna wrap up, and I apologize because I know Nathan, you gotta go as well.
Not, I think my wife's already asleep. I'll go poker. Wake up.
But yeah, I mean, we'll just go ahead and wrap up with everyone. Natasha, if you can let us know where we can find you and your content and closing thoughts.
Yeah, of course. So yeah, again, you can find me on TikTok. It's NMNAP, so NMKNAPP. And on Twitter, NNapper, NKNAPPER. So you can find me on both of those platforms where I just talk about Star Wars and all kinds of other stuff. And I guess like closing thoughts are just I just want people to care about compassionate characters as much as they do, anti-heroes and other characters. That's all. I'm like, I, I've really appreciated. I know there's like a lot of negativity and all this other toxic stuff, like in the fandom space on TikTok and Twitter and all these other things. But to be honest, over the last couple of years, I've just found so many. Oh yes, so many incredible content creators who have just opened up my mind to think about Star Wars and other perspectives, and who have just been really committed to creating like safe spaces to have dialogues where we might disagree sometimes, and we are critiquing and sharing what we love in a way that just feels really like beautiful. And I think it happens more than it doesn't. And yeah, I want to spend more time focusing on that and just like shouting out and blocking out like all the like haters and negative people, and like giving them less attention is my goal. So yeah,
Beautiful.
thanks for having me.
Yeah, thank you for coming on. It was awesome to have you. How about you, Nathan?
You can find me on TikTok at The Favoring Wind, where I continue to talk about just talking about story and movies. And I think the thing I want to leave people with is deprogram and ask yourself why we treat white male characters differently than we treat everybody else, and why the standard is different. Most specifically in this conversation, why we seem to be giving such a hard time to women unless women are presented to us as men in a way that is patriarchally acceptable. But don't hold people of color and women to a standard you wouldn't hold a white man to. That is the definition of supremacy. And I look forward to continuing to talk about that in the Marvel franchise as Doctor Strange comes closer.
Yeah, that's a big conversation that has been and needs to continue happening, because people are weird. Say Wanda is more powerful than Doctor Strange and see what happens.
Yes,
which she is. Yeah, it's confirmed.
Unfounded.
We know it.
unquestionably.
Last but certainly not least, Stardust M.
You can find me on TikTok at StardustM or on Twitter at _StardustM. I have a lot less eloquent thoughts on Twitter, but it's a fun time. And I think similar to Nathan, I encourage us all to give nuance to fictional characters and people, but in this context, characters. Think about, why, even if you dislike a character, that's fine, but why do you not view their trauma or story in the same way that you would view a white man's? And and also, like, in that term, like, follow other people who disagree with you, like, not in the way that they'll like make fun of you, but like make sure to gather the nuance by engaging with people who might have a different take than you, I think, and be willing to listen to their opinions and learn from them as you might expect them to listen and learn from you. And I think that's especially important with some of the Star Wars shows coming up. So
Yes, thank you so much. Last thing for me to say is that I meant to say earlier, but I believe that kids are immune to camp. It happens. They see it on screen. They don't know it. They don't understand it. And then they just absorb it. And so anytime they rewatch it, they don't see it anymore. And then they grow up, and then the new thing comes out, and it has the same level of camp, but now they see it because that's not their camp. Anyhow, thank you guys once again for coming out. Thank you everyone in the chat. Montgomery Harris, Assad, Miss Aggie had Element 7 in here, St. Pat, Escape Reality Films. We awesome people. I don't know if Fern is still hanging out here in the chat. Fern is amazing. Luke from the Pod Ones podcast. So many amazing people. It's an amazing community. I love having these conversations, and that's like these talks are what keep me going. So I appreciate having more to keep going. Cal 4, did I not mention Cal? Anyways, Cal 4 is great. But that is the end. Thank you once again, and may the force